And these sentences are going to be tough and they're going to be very widely publicized. And you're going to, by the end of the week, probably have dozens of people who have been given very tough sentences. The government is trying to restore the link between actions and consequences. They are trying to show these rioters that if you go out there, if you loot, if you steal, if you trash places, you will be jailed.
A rioter who punched a police officer in Southport has been sentenced to 3 years in prison. 2 other men involved in the rioting have also been jailed for violent disorder, receiving 2.5 years and 20 months respectively. Jonathan Egan from the Crown Prosecution Service gave this warning to rioters outside the court.
Violence, rioting and aggression will never be tolerated in this country, and we stand ready to use the full force of the law against any others who have been or are considering joining these intolerable scenes. The Crown Prosecution's message is clear. Whatever your motivation for targeting police, inciting hatred or wreaking havoc on your community, you'll be swiftly punished.
Well, there could be more trouble tonight. 6,000 extra riot police are on standby as far-right protesters are expected to target more than 30 immigration centres across Britain. 420 people have been arrested in connection with the violent protests. But the Tory leadership contender Robert Jenrick has told Times Radio more could be done in terms of policing.
Well, look, I think we can all see that the government understands the severity of the situation and is taking important measures, whether that's getting more prosecutors, having court sit over the weekend. I think there are more steps that could be taken. I've suggested the other day that leave could be cancelled amongst police officers, that you could make use of special constables, that there could be more mutual aid between police forces.
That was Robert Jenrick. The online component of this, of course, is very important. And in a minute, we'll speak to Bruce Daisley, the former vice president of Twitter, and also to Francis Swain. He's a former managing partner and now immigration and asylum lawyer at Lee Day, the law firm. Frances Swain, not Francis Swain. But first, let's get the latest on this with Steve Swinford, political editor of The Times. Steve, thanks for joining us. What do we know already about what might happen tonight and the idea that immigration centres might be targeted?
Well, we know that the government is very worried. We know that a list of 39 immigration centres has been circulating online. Not all of them are immigration centres. One of them is a home of someone who has nothing to do. An elderly person has nothing to do with any of this. But they are being singled out for gatherings. And there are also suggestions of dozens more gatherings outside hotels housing asylum seekers again. So it looks like it could get pretty grim later on. The police are ready. They are issuing some pretty stark warnings about it. And I guess we'll just have to see how it plays out. But it looks the government is worried and the police are worried.
Because this morning we did have the inquest into the deaths of those girls, those poor girls. It was convened and then adjourned quite quickly. It does give us a chance to reflect on how we got from there, that awful event, to where we are now.
There was a lot of disinformation online. There was, including from prominent politicians, over the murder of those girls and over the suspect and who they were. There were suggestions that people weren't being told the truth, and into that disinformation kind of grew this whole issues around migration and wider issues around that. And that's what we're seeing a lot of now. A lot of these people are coming out because they've got concerns about mass migration. But look, I mean, Keir Starmer is right. This is criminal disorder. It is criminal acts, and the government won't tolerate it, right? That's the position they're taking.
That is the position they're taking. Do you think there's going to be pressure on what is a fairly new government to do more if this continues through this week and perhaps even beyond? The riots in 2011, about 5 days worth of riots, we're about that stage now, aren't we?
We are at that stage, although there's far fewer arrests, and compared to the scale of what we saw in 2011, where it was thousands of people a day. We're not at that stage yet, but I think what the government is pinning its hopes on is sentencing. We are beginning to see that today. So we've seen someone, as you say, sentenced for 3 years, another one for 2.5 years, and these sentences are going to be tough and they're going to be very widely publicized, and you're going to, by the end of the week, probably have dozens of people who have been given very tough sentences. The government is trying to restore the link between actions and consequences. They are trying to show these rioters that if you go out there, if you loot, if you steal, if you trash places, you will be jailed. And they're trying to do that in the most compressed time period properly, so possible. So we'll see how that gets. But I mean, they're also up against, because the weather's good, quite frankly. And as long as the weather remains good, it's very difficult to, people come out when the weather's good, they drink more when the weather's good, and it's more of a problem.
Yeah, thank you very much. Steve Swinford, political editor there of The Times. And now let's speak to Bruce Daisley. He's a former vice president of Twitter, just to sort of cover off the online aspect of this. Bruce, thank you very much for joining us. I just sort of catching up this morning on what's happened in the whole sort of Elon Musk, Twitter, X versus UK government. It seems to be, in essence, X has told the UK government to shove off. They're completely ignoring them. Have I got that right? Is that the thrust of it?
I wouldn't know if there's been any interactions, but certainly I think X and Elon Musk are participating this in two different ways. Firstly, they're participating as a platform that has welcomed back far-right figures. So Tommy Robinson, you'll remember around the time of the September the January the 6th riots in the US, there was a lot of people who were suspended. Tommy Robinson, Katie Hopkins, people like that were suspended. They were welcomed back by Elon Musk. And so X is providing a platform for those people. In addition, Elon Musk is a pretty active participant himself and has been not only trolling Keir Starmer with his own replies, but has been retweeting and reposting some far-right content. So I think the organization and the owner represents a big challenge. How do you control oligarchs, or how do you make oligarchs respond to the will of a democratically elected government? I think that's the challenge.
I think that's an important point you make there, because I think a lot of people will just think, oh, well, there's too much content flooding online. They can't do anything about it. They don't have the processes in place internally to police it properly. But what you're saying is actually something different, that this is a deliberate decision by X, an editorial policy, as it were, to encourage this kind of content.
Yeah, Tommy Robinson himself said that Elon Musk is the person who's been best for free speech this century, because Tommy Robinson has gone from the bargain bin of forgotten political extremists to being one of the most seen posters of content on the platform. And, you know, those things don't happen by accident. Certainly Elon Musk has contributed. The challenge, of course, is regulation. Now, you know, we possibly might say, well, Ofcom are now responsible for social media. Maybe they'll do something. Until now, Ofcom have pretty much demonstrated themselves to be pretty limp-wristed when it comes to regulation, so they've not really held GB News to account. But the challenge, of course, is what can they do? Well, they can fine X up to 10% of its global revenue. If that fine isn't paid, then they can apply criminal charges against Elon Musk. And the man responsible for public policy on X is British. He's a guy called Nick Pickles. He's a Yorkshireman, moved to San Francisco, but he could be liable to criminal charges if the platform doesn't respond to Ofcom regulation.
Is there a timing issue here? Because the online safety bill, which provides for those penalties that you talked about, the 10% of global revenue fine, is it actually in action yet, or is it still being debated? Because yesterday we were hearing that Ofcom is still talking about some kind of code of practice for social media platforms before we get to this idea of being able to fine people.
Yeah, it's passed into law already, but you're exactly right that the questions of interpretation are currently ongoing. So at the moment, there's been no clear code communicated with the companies. It's an illustration, really, until now, that most of the regulation of tech firms has been, to use a sort of dated phrase, but gentlemen's agreements. It's been sort of discussions. It's been a polite request to deal with things. Normally, social platforms have been keen to preserve their reputation, so they don't want racist figures becoming the most dominant contributors to conversation. So they've gone out of their way to try and police their own domain to some extent. Under Musk, that's gone out of the window. And so there is going to be a question of whether Ofcom could hurriedly seek to try and seek some control over this. It does beg the question about the leadership of Ofcom. Is Ofcom up to the task?
Isn't there another angle to this? I mean, you talked about them opening up to right-wing commentators, but there's a much more obvious link, isn't there? That Elon Musk has come out in favor of Donald Trump for the US presidency. He's raising money for him. He is apparently going to interview him on Monday. Don't you think his attacks on the UK are just a way of saying, listen, if you vote Democrat, you might get this?
The danger with Elon Musk is that we can ever construe that he has a plan. And I think the one thing that characterizes most of Musk's interactions with the world is messiness and chaos. I don't think he's got a plan. I don't think there's a 4D chess. I don't think this guy is thinking several moves ahead of us. He yesterday he sued all of the advertisers who aren't spending with him, which is a pretty remarkable thing to do, because it suggests that he doesn't believe that his advertisers have the freedom of expression to not give him money. So it's a remarkable playbook he's got. It's riddled with inconsistencies. And I think in truth, to try and project any sort of intellectual plan onto Musk probably wouldn't withstand any degree of scrutiny.
A very good point, actually. Thank you very much, Bruce Daisley, former vice president there of Twitter.